If you're thinking about buying the new iPad with the M4 processor, don't do it. Unless you have a specific need to upgrade and buy the latest iPad, you're probably wasting your money. And I know it's easy to get caught up with the hype and the marketing around how cool and amazing these new devices are, and they definitely are. That screen, that thinness, all that processing power, they're all really cool things, but they're also crazy expensive. One thing that stood out for me when it comes to these new iPads was watching MKBHD and Dave 2D's reviews when they both admitted to using a 2018 iPad Pro.
And spoiler alert, it's almost exactly the same experience.
And that tells me two things. The first one is how good are older generation iPads if they're still using devices that are 6 years old for their daily drivers. And the second thing is, well, you don't have to upgrade to the latest iPad all the time. If these big tech reviewers haven't upgraded in 6 years, tells you that the products are pretty well long lasting and you don't have to upgrade to the latest one all the time. In this video, we're going to break down why you don't need to upgrade to the latest iPad, but that doesn't mean there's not an iPad out there for you. So let's jump ahead. I'm going to create a whiteboard and we're going to break this down into what I think is the best value iPad for most people out there today. So what I've done here is I've grabbed basically the hero reasons to each of these iPads that Apple calls out. And what we'll find is that they're actually very similar when we break it down. Aside from the fact that the base model iPad is $599 and the iPad Pro 11-inch starts at $1,700. You could essentially get 3 of the base model iPads for the cost of one iPad Pro, and that is at the 11-inch model. If we look at the key tech specs here on all of these, we'll see a lot of similarities between all 3 of them, and the biggest one is, of course, they are all running iPad OS, so they have the same operating system between all 3 generations of iPad here. If we look at the top line here, what we can see here is the 3 processor differences, where the iPad has the A14 Bionic chip, which is on paper the slowest of the bunch. Then it jumps up to the really powerful Apple M2 processor, and then the new Apple M4 in the iPad Pro. On paper, the M2 and M4 obliterate the A14, but in reality, the A14 is more than enough for what most people use their iPads for, which is content consumption. So if you're watching things like Netflix and Facebook and that sort of stuff, the iPad base model compared to the Air and the Pro is going to do the job just as well as the more expensive models. There is, of course, a really big difference when Apple talks about the iPad Pro display. It does have this amazing Ultra Retina XDR with ProMotion, and it's got some, you can get additional nano texture displays and things like that. And all the reviews say these displays look freaking amazing. And that's when you compare it side by side to an older iPad. But when you have just an individual iPad in your hand, you can't really tell that much of a difference. Yes, it looks slightly brighter, slightly nicer, but is it worth $1,700 just for a slightly nicer 11-inch screen? You're really paying for this thing that doesn't give you all that much value, except for the fact of saying you have the latest and greatest screen from Apple. If we look at, of course, the cameras on these, they all now have the landscape camera, that 12 megapixel ultra wide at the front for those video calls. They all have center stage. Of course, if you go to the iPad Pro, you do get a few extra features like the LiDAR scanner. But again, unless you really need a LiDAR scanner, what is the point of paying triple the amount when the base model iPad will do everything you need? And that front-facing camera is just as good on video calls, where you're caring more about the person that you're talking to, where it's just, we're all used to using crappy webcams, and these iPads have much better webcams than most laptops out there anyway. The next thing is, of course, the connectivity. So there is a big jump from Wi-Fi 6 to 6E in the iPad Air and iPad Pro. But again, is it worth that extra 3 times the amount? I don't think it is. And then, of course, you still have 5G. So if you are connected and using it cellularly, you are using on 5G anyway, so you're going to get really quick speeds if you've got a SIM card inserted or if you're using an eSIM. So again, the iPad Pro doesn't have a massive jump there over the base model iPad. One thing it does, both the Air and the Pro have, is of course the compatibility with the new Apple Pencil Pro. So if you're an artist and you're using it for writing and drawing like I am right now, I'm using a Surface Pro with a pencil, but if you're using it for art, the Apple iPad Pro and Apple iPad Air do give you the option of a better drawing experience. But if you're just using it for note-taking and for annotating documents, I think the regular Apple Pencil with USB-C is going to do the job for you. And then, of course, you do have the Magic Keyboard. So the keyboards on the iPad Air and iPad Pro do look so much better. If you're replacing your laptop with an iPad, maybe you want it for the nicer keyboard and better trackpad. But again, that is if you're using it as a laptop replacement, not as a new iPad. So if we're breaking down all the key comparisons that Apple calls out on their website as to the key features of the iPad Pro, iPad Air, and the base model iPad, the base model iPad for a third of the price to me stands out as the best value. Keep in mind, these are Australian dollars. But if we're looking at the hero specifications here, I don't see any real justification for majority of people out there to spend more than the base model iPad. One thing to call out though is that the base model does only come with 64 gigs of storage. So if you do end up getting this device, you might want to bump it up to the 256 gig instead. But even then, if we jump on the website here and let's configure our iPad, I'm going to hit buy. We're going to pick a color. I actually really like the blue. I'm even going to get the 256 gig. We're going to go for the Wi-Fi option, no keyboard, no engraving. We're going to add the Apple Pencil and we're going to add the Magic Folio keyboard. So this brings it up to a grand total with 256 gig hard drive, and Apple Pencil, and a keyboard folio. So if we fully kitted out our base model iPad with a 256 gig SSD, the Apple Pencil, as well as the Magic Keyboard or the Keyboard Folio, that comes to a grand total of $1,387, which is still cheaper than the $1,700 for the base iPad Pro without a keyboard or without a pencil. So if you're looking, and it's just slightly more expensive, or not slightly, but it is more expensive than the iPad Air, but you're getting the complete kit here with the keyboard, the case, and the pencil for $1,387. So if you're looking at buying an iPad, I personally think the base model iPad is the best one to go for the majority of people out there. And I'd actually even recommend, if you don't need the Apple keyboard, go get the Logitech keyboards. They're just as good and they're a lot cheaper. And if you don't need that 256 gig SSD, drop it down to a 64 gig SSD, buy iCloud storage, and use cloud storage for most of your data. And you're bringing the total down here to just over $1,000, which in my opinion makes the base model iPad with all the accessories the best option to buy over the new M4 iPad Air, the M4 iPad Pro and the M2 iPad Air. Of course, if you do have specific reasons for buying the new iPad Pro, I would love to know them in the comment section down below. Let me know your thoughts on what you think about the base model iPad. Is it worth it in your opinion? I think it actually is the best value iPad out there on the market and the one most people should go for. Of course, if you like this video, let me know by giving it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
In the wild, where the trees sway, there's a fox riding gay.